right about now, we are in Reston, Virginia, okay? And in Reston, Virginia, we drove from the station. It took us about 25, 30 minutes to get here. But on the way to where we're located right now, we passed these incredibly beautiful homes. I'm talking like mansions that were beautiful. And then we pull up into a parking lot, and on this building, it says Thompson Hospitality. And I didn't know what to expect coming in here, but I've made it in here and I'm like, wow. I'm like looking around. We're all looking around like, wow, this is beautiful. And today on Culture Text, we have the one and only Mr. Warren Thompson, the chairperson, the president of Thompson Hospitality. The person, so all of this is pretty much here because of you, right?
Well, I would say the team.
The
It's been
team?
been a
The
team
team.
effort.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a family essentially, right?
Correct. My sister's involved, and my brother has been involved in the business as well.
Awesome. Well, Warren, first off, I want to say thank you for giving us the time to sit and talk with you. You know, Culture Text, the idea is we try to interview the architects behind the culture. And when it comes to restaurants like Matchbox, like Hen Quarter, these are places that people frequent. They take pictures in front of. It has an atmosphere and environment that is amazing. And they don't know who's behind the ownership or who's running these things.
Okay.
And so recently in DC, we had the first Black DC Restaurant Week.
Correct.
And we invited them on our show, the founders of Black Restaurant Week on the show. And they brought up Matchbox and Hen Quarter. And they mentioned it being Black owned. And we said, really? Like, you know, and she said, no, it's Thompson Hospitality is behind it, and they're a Black owned company. And so from there, we began our journey to find you and to talk to you.
Okay.
Because again, a lot of times we frequent these places and don't know who's behind them.
Right.
So, Warren, first off, tell us a little bit about Thompson Hospitality and ownership. So again, because I may be incorrect, but we thought originally, okay, you own Hen Quarter and Matchbox, but then I see Thompson Hospitality and management. So, can you tell us a little bit about Thompson Hospitality?
Okay. Thompson Hospitality started in 1992 after spending 9 years with Marriott learning the restaurant business. I left Marriott and bought 31 big boy restaurants from Marriott, converted about 27 of those over to Shoney's here in the Washington market. That's how we started Thompson Hospitality. We were a franchisee of Shoney's and Bob's Big Boys. Unfortunately, those brands started to fail. We were obligated to do the conversion, so we began actually in the first year selling off the restaurants as we were converting to extract sort of the real estate value out of the transaction so that we could pay down the debt that we had on the original transaction. Marriott held the senior debt when I bought the restaurant business. They held debt for about $13.5 million. I raised $2 million of equity capital, of which I had $100,000 in the deal. But I was able to retain about 56% of the company ownership at the time. So subsequently, we bought out the other investors. We sold off those restaurants over the course of about 10 years, paid off the original debt associated with the transaction, and we moved into contract food service with an emphasis on providing food service to historical Black colleges and universities. So during that transitional phase, we basically got out of the restaurant business, moved into contract food service. Then in 2008, 7 or 8, we got back into the restaurant business with the purchase of the Austin Grill brand, which was a local brand. Then we bought the American Taproom name and brand locally here in Reston. So we began growing the restaurant side of the business again with those brands. Subsequent to that, we created our own brand, Hen Quarter, which is a Southern concept, a small version of that called Hen Penny. We created Willie T's Lobster Shack, which is a brand that we own. We created BRB, which was Be Right Burger. You'll find that at the Dulles Airport right now. And then we began to look at other brands in the market that we could attempt to buy or to get control of to continue to grow the retail side. That led us to Matchbox and Big Buns. So in 2018, we purchased controlling interests of Matchbox, 51% interest in Matchbox, and also the operating responsibility has fallen to Thompson Hospitality. So we are now operating the 11 Matchbox restaurants. We have 3 under construction that'll open up within the next 3 to 4 months here in the DC area. We also own Big Buns now, which is a gourmet burger brand out of Arlington and Boston, where those are located. Shirlington and Boston. We are now going to continue to look for other brands to either strategically partner with, acquire, or some combination thereof as we continue to expand the retail side of the company.
What would you value Thompson Hospitality at currently? If you could,
Okay.
if you could give kind of like a guesstimate, or
Right.
or do you know that, or
Well, we're a privately held company, so the valuation is you can value a company several different ways. One would be based on the assets on the balance sheet. Another would be a multiple of of earnings. I'll say our revenue today for this year, 2019, we expect to hit about $800 million in revenue. Our bottom line is strong. I typically don't give out exactly what the valuation is, but our goal and my goal is to get the business to $1 billion of revenue before I'm ready to turn it over to someone else, and to hopefully get the corresponding EBITDA flow out of that with the appropriate multiple. So let's just say we expect the company to overall at some point in time get close to the $1 billion valuation.
wow. I'm sitting next to $1 billion man. That's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
That's pretty awesome right there. So now that we kind of have established what Thompson Hospitality has and the brands, I'm going to get back to the actual business of Thompson Hospitality, but I want to go back to where it all began.
Okay.
I realized I was reading a bit about you, and I saw that both your parents were educators.
That's correct. Yeah.
So you had 2 parents. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Are you from Virginia?
I am.
Okay.
I grew up in a small town called Windsor, Virginia, southeast part of Virginia, the Tidewater area.
Okay.
Both my parents were educators. We started out in segregated schools when I was grades 1 through 5. Schools were schools were segregated when I was in the 5th grade. But when we were in segregated schools, the black school at that time, we had grades 1 through 12. My father was a math teacher, algebra teacher. My mother was a home economics teacher. So my older brother and I, along with my parents, the 4 of us would go to school every day together as a family. All 4 of us would get into the same car, drive to the same school. In the evenings, some evenings I'd go to my mother's class after school and learn how to cook. She was a home economics teacher. Or other days I'd go to my father's class and learn algebra, even while I was an elementary kid. So I became pretty good in math and cooking, and I think subsequently from that developed this desire to own restaurant, to be in the restaurant business. But it was a great experience. We were a very religious family, so Sundays we'd go to church together, and 5 days a week we would go to school together. We also raised hogs and sold produce as a side business. Because my parents didn't make a lot of money, we always had businesses on the side. So we'd raise hogs, we sold produce, we would buy peaches and apples up in the mountains of Virginia, bring them to Tidewater, buy watermelons and collard greens and other vegetables from the Tidewater market and take it up into the mountains of Virginia and sell them. So it was an entrepreneurial type family, and a lot of what I learned about business or know about business, I learned from my father at a very early age.
So he kind of gave you that hustler mentality, I guess, early on. It's like, yeah, you can't just have one. You can't just be a teacher. You're gonna have to get some other things going. And I think it's interesting that you knew early on you wanted to be in the restaurant business. Was it something where you were in a restaurant and you felt that, like, you saw how it works?
Ironically, for our family, a big night out was going to Portsmouth, Virginia, on a Friday night to get grocery.
Okay.
And we would often stop by a restaurant called, it was a Shoney's at the time. And when I was about 12 years old, I said to my parents one night that I'd like to own one of these one day. And they said, you can do whatever you want if you're willing to work hard. So from that point on, it was a focus on owning, trying to figure out how to own and operate restaurants. So I went to undergrad school at Hampden-Sydney College, followed my brother there, who was 2 years ahead of me. Hampden-Sydney was a liberal arts college, so the closest thing to business was an econ major. So I majored in economics. And then I argued my way into grad school to UVA directly from undergrad. And they were willing to forgive or forego the 2-year work requirement because I made the argument I'd worked enough as a kid raising hogs and selling produce and cutting grass and those kinds of things. So I went directly from undergrad to UVA for grad school and got an MBA. Between the first and second year of business school, I worked at Marriott as an intern. Dick Marriott, who ran the restaurant group for Marriott at the time, had a special program that he would bring 12 MBAs in each summer. At the end of the summer, he'd make an offer to one person to come back in his special program. It basically forced you to start as an assistant manager in a restaurant to learn the business from the ground up. They paid you an MBA salary, but you started flipping hamburgers. So I got the offer for my year and came back right after grad school, graduated on a Sunday, started work that Monday, flipping hamburgers in a Roy Rogers, and moved up through Marriott. When I went there, I told Marriott I'd give them 7 years. They said, look, if we can get 7 years from an MBA, that's good. I ended up giving them 9. Then at the end of the 9th year, that's when I bought the 31 restaurants from them and started Thompson Hospitality.
Incredible. So why 7? How did you come up with the number like I'll give you 7 years? Is there
My father, when I was a kid, told me often the story of Cleave. Cleave was a slave who was born in the mountains of Virginia. He was a slave for 30 years. He learned the blacksmith business as a slave. When the Emancipation Proclamation took place, he was freed at the age of 30, and he started his own blacksmith business. And he was a very, very successful blacksmith. Cleave was my great-great-grandfather. So my father would tell me that story all the time. And so I wanted to use that formula of learning the business on someone else's dime. Then at the age of 30, I wanted to start my own business, leave the plantation, if you will, and start my own. So I ended up 2 years late, but left at 32 and started.
That's not bad. That's not bad. But I love that mentality. I think a lot of times we want to go into businesses, and I've been guilty of this myself. Like you want to start something so bad, but you don't understand the value of maybe getting in somewhere and learning that business first before you just jump out there and say, I want to own a restaurant. You might want to try to get that experience.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably a good lesson for a lot of us out here that we're looking to start a business because, did you ever have like a problem, or not a problem, but did you ever feel some kind of way flipping burgers at a Roy Rogers when you get in your MBA? I feel like that's a humbling experience.
Oh, it was. I mean, my classmates' friends would come by and get me to wait on them and cook them a hamburger, and years later they were asking for a job. But it was a humbling experience, but it was the way to really learn the business. And so now if I'm talking to a group of managers, I know what it's like to close a restaurant at night, to mop the floors, to clean the toilets, to cash people out at night, to get the employees to leave on time, and what it means to run a restaurant really from the ground up.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, we're talking to Warren Thompson right now, Thompson Hospitality, talking about his journey of creating and building this empire that's well on its way to $1 billion. So the deal with Marriott, right? did you know that that opportunity would present itself, or how did that come about where, you get to 7 years, 9 years even, and you're like, okay, let me buy these from you? How did that come about for you?
Now, when I started at Marriott, I had no idea that Marriott would ever decide to exit the restaurant business. Marriott started as a restaurant company. Bill Marriott, the oldest brother, chairman at the time, was basically committed to the hotel business. The younger son of the founder, Dick Marriott, was committed to the restaurant side of the business. When the founder passed away, the father, the patriarch, Bill Marriott announced shortly thereafter that Marriott would become just a hotel company and exit the restaurant business. So that opportunity I didn't know would ever happen when I started at Marriott 8 years prior to that.
Got it.
So it was fortunate that it happened, that they decided to exit the restaurant business, that I was able to go in and negotiate a deal directly with Bill Marriott and Dick Marriott to buy the restaurants in the Washington market. It's fortunate that they were willing to provide the financing for it, because I would not have been able to do it at a bank. It was not a bankable transaction.
Okay,
We
that was going
didn't-
to be my
right,
next
right.
question. Yeah.
So it had to be seller financing.
Okay.
So I probably paid full price, a higher price than I would have paid if I were able to finance it some other way. But it did get us in business. Now, we lost $25 million on that transaction early on over the course of time, but we were able to get started. So,
Even so, when you say you lost 25 million, what does that mean exactly when you say?
meaning the restaurants lost money over the course of that 10 years that we ran them.
Oh, right, because the brands kind of
The
started
brand
declining.
started to tank. And so the money that we were able to extract from the real estate, so we had leases that were undervalued. And in some cases, landlords were willing to buy us out of the lease to get those control of that property back. We had an average of 22 years left on the leases when we bought them. So we would sell the restaurants in some cases back to the landlords, to other cases to Outback, other restaurant groups who would come in and pay a high dollar amount to buy one restaurant in a particular neighborhood, as opposed to when we bought the full 31 across the region. So we did that to extract the value out of the leases to pay off some of the debts that we were racking up because the restaurants were losing money. And it took us 10 years to unwind the transaction compared to, we got into the business, signed all of the leases and did the deal over the course of 6 months. But it took us about 10 years to unwind the transaction and to move into contract food service while we were doing the exit of the restaurant group.
At any point in this, did you feel discouraged or anything? Because I would think I feel like in one instance it's a great opportunity.
Right.
This big thing happens. You got off the plantation,
Right.
but the brands start declining. Was there any feeling like, oh my God, the boat is on fire?
Absolutely. I think the most difficult time occurred. We started the company October 2nd of 1992. March of 1993, we had a blizzard, and we couldn't get the restaurants open for a solid week. So we had 31 restaurants. Cash was being depleted. The startup capital that we raised was starting to dwindle. We had this unheard of blizzard at the end of March of 93. Couldn't get the restaurants open for 10 days. So the cash flow, you still have to pay the managers. You've got food in the restaurants that is spoiling and not able to sell it. Had to throw it away. And then my father passed away in June of 93. So my father was my closest friend, my confidant. And so I began to wonder, could I really do this? So I went away for a weekend, got away to myself and meditated and thought about it, and came back to the group and said, look, we're now going to move into contract food service. Our business plan said we would get into it in year 5. We're now going to get into the contract business within the first year.
Wow.
So we began looking for opportunities to do that. We found the first one. A person I knew was running Baltimore City Community College. She was not happy with her current provider, kept complaining. I said, why don't you just get rid of them and bring us in? She called me on a Thursday and said, I'm getting rid of them today. I need service on Monday. So a group of us went up to Baltimore over the weekend and figured out how to get food delivered to the kids on that Monday, and we started our contract business that way.
Wow.
The second one we got, I woke up one morning, I'd had a dream that my father basically encouraged me to call his alma mater. So I did so that Monday morning, and when I called, I got to the president of the college, and you never really get cold calling, get to speak to the president, but this person answered. And I told him that I wanted to talk to him about his food service. I gave him my name. He said, Thompson. He said, do you know Fred Thompson? I said, well, Fred Thompson was my father. He said, your father and I were classmates. You can come down and talk to me. So I went down, we made a pitch. A week later, we made another pitch, and we ended up getting the contract. And that was our second account, but our first board operation where we actually had students who live on campus that we provided the service to.
And what school was that?
St. Paul's College.
Okay, St. Paul.
So that really launched our historical black college business and our contract food service division.
So I assume you were building these relationships, and that helps you get into these other schools because you're doing good work. And
correct. We're now the largest provider to historical black colleges. We have roughly 25 schools that we serve. So it's been a good business for us over time.
Yeah. So making that one decision at a really tough time in your life basically changed the whole business, and now it becomes profitable. Now it becomes, you're able to get on track.
Right.
Wow, that's awesome. So at this point, did you start kind of feeling good now? Because, I see that you got your family involved. So, I mean, when you talk about business and your family as well, I'm sure going through that time, you got to be concerned about your family and just everybody that's involved that you're helping that gets paychecks and things like that. So once you turn it around, do you really start getting that confidence? And
yeah, my brother and sister joined the company within the first 2 months that we started. So they joined in 1992, right after we started in October. They came in November and December. So they've been with the company since day one. Ali Azima, who is my CFO, has been here since day one. A couple of our other executives have been here in excess of 17, 18 years. So we've had a group of people that have kind of hung in there through the bad times and now the better and good times. They've seen the company when we were going through a very, very challenging financial situation those first 5 years. And it is a different situation now. We never want to repeat. And I think we've gotten smarter over the years. And as we've gotten larger, we've gotten probably more conservative in terms of taking risk. The risk I took at 32, I would never take at 59. So it's different, right?
yeah, I noticed in one of the interviews I was reading about you, you took a class where they asked you to kind of keep a journal or keep a diary, and you wrote a letter to like your future child, essentially. Can you share with us a little bit about what you wrote in that letter, or what you would, because you said you sometimes go back to it to look at where your mental was at that time.
Yeah, it was a journal to be written to an offspring, son or a daughter, or and in my case, I've shared it with my nephew. But I talked about things like working with women, because this was done when I was at an all-male school, or no, in grad school, which I'd come out of an all-male school environment and had to make a conscious effort to realize and to understand, and to, when you come from an environment where that's all male for 4 years, and you're now in a co-ed environment, there are different dynamics. And the same thing in the workplace. The industry that I chose happens to be a male-dominated industry, the hospitality business as it was. It's changed now, which is good. But that whole interaction, I've always viewed women as equals, as peers, as people I can learn from. I've never had a problem reporting to a woman when I was in Marriott, but a lot of my friends and a lot of my peers have. And so I've always wanted to make sure that within the company and within this company that everybody has an opportunity, no matter gender, no matter race, and we pride ourselves on that. So wrote about that. I wrote about the importance of working hard and working smart. Talked about not wasting time, making every minute count. We talked earlier about how many hours I spend at work.
Yeah.
And that's not always in the office. I mean, I can work wherever. But I don't get excited about how many hours I spend. It's how much time and how much I can accomplish during that time that I spend. And so I talked about that in there. Wrote a chapter on time utilization and being able to make every minute count. I talked into one chapter about at some point in life you get to a point where money is less important than time. When you have maybe more money than you have time left in life, it puts things into a very different perspective. You start to value things a lot differently. It's not so much about the next dollar, but it's about how you spend the next hour. And it's more important that you realize that time is more valuable than money the older you get.
I was going to say, about what age does that kick in? Because right now I'm out here trying to get this dollar, okay? No. But if you could speak back to your 30-year-old self, looking back on everything in your journey, what advice would you give your 30-year-old self who was, flipping those burgers at Roy Rogers and getting his MBA?
I think there would have been more of a balance in life in terms of personal and work. I'm engaged now. I've never been married, so I probably would have done that a little earlier. Okay. So I don't advise people on that part of life. But.
So not just so I assume then in your 30s you were like all work no play type that.
Right. Yeah.
So you didn't just have fun. It was just like
I had some fun, maybe too much fun.
Too much. Okay, so it was a little
Two
fun.
extremes, yeah.
Two extremes. Okay, so it's like one or the other.
Right.
Okay, so you would tell yourself just have a little bit more balance.
Exactly.
Balance is key.
Exactly.
Okay, we're talking to Warren Thompson, Thompson Hospitality. Again, I appreciate you just for sitting down, taking the time to explain, explain your story and explain what Thompson Hospitality is. It's interesting. I did an event with the Black Student Union at Harvard University, and their keynote speaker was Sheila Johnson. And at the time, she was talking about hospitality, and she was encouraging Black people to go into the hospitality industry. She said we are there's not a lot of us in it. Like we're less than 10%, I believe, involved in hospitality. So when I see Thompson Hospitality and what you've built, tell us a little bit about the hospitality industry from your standpoint and how necessary and important it is for more Black people to get in the game.
Yeah, I think the hospitality industry, number one, how you define it is it's a very, very broad industry, and it touches so many aspects that people really don't think about. So we all think about a hospital, but a hospital has a major hospitality component, the food service piece of it, the janitorial piece of it, the group or the company that moves the patients around. We all view that as part of the hospitality industry.
Okay.
So when you think about sports and entertainment, stadiums and arenas, it has a major hospitality component. Obviously, the hotels we look at as hospitality. When you check into a hotel, there's the rooms piece of it, but there's also the food and beverage piece of it. There's also the janitorial piece of it. There are all of those components that are part of the hospitality industry. Within the hospitality industry, there has to be 250 or so different career paths that a young person could take. Within the hospitality field, you don't think as much about the finance aspect of it, but there's a unique type of financial structure within the hospitality industry that having a focus and understanding that is a path and a career path that opens up. Now that splits off into IT, all types of technology that's supporting our business. The one thing that the hospitality industry does present is it's not a business, it's not an industry that can be exported and done elsewhere. It has to be basically done locally. It's not going to find its way to India, to other countries in terms of being outsourced.
Right.
Some of the technology, some of the support aspect of it will. So, for example, we have a staffing firm here. Some of the people who work in our staffing firm are located in India. Some of the people who run the call centers work there in India to support our staffing firm here. But that's a very, very small aspect of it. But when it comes to the recruiters, the people who are doing the sales, those are all people located here because they're calling on their clients, potential clients here in this market.
Right.
But I think the one thing that's affecting our industry more than anything today is technology. Whether it's Uber Eats or social media, Grubhub, the digital format, that part of our business is growing by 20 to 25% a year. And so it's causing all restaurants to become smaller and smaller. I saw an article just last week about virtual restaurants. Sooner or later, in 1,500 square feet, you might have 8 different restaurants running out of that space with no seats, all operating virtually using digital format to market to the customers.
Wow.
And we will be testing that. In fact, we tested it 15, 20 years ago. We put a brand called Steaks to Go in the back of a Shoney's, and we were going to operate it out of the back door of the Shoney's and deliver steaks into the community, not saying that it doesn't matter from the person's perspective who's eating at home where the steaks are actually coming from. It was just ahead of its time. But now that is exactly what the virtual restaurant format is actually going to be. It'll be a very small space. It'll be in warehouse space somewhere. The food will be prepared and delivered to homes using Grubhub or Uber Eats or Postmates and all of those. And so that's where the industry is headed.
That's pretty cool. I didn't even think about that, but that would be very interesting. I could see that.
Right.
But I still value, going to a restaurant, being able to
Right.
sit down. I mean, that's the thing you love about a Matchbox and Hen Quarter is like that environment because, and you do like your food to go.
Right.
You like it quick. You like it delivered, but you also like kind of going out sometimes, hanging with
There
your
are
friends.
aspects of our business that I think are growing. So the brunch day part, I've always said if a restaurant cannot do an excellent brunch program, it shouldn't be in business. Because that's the one day part now that is growing.
Yeah.
More people are socializing at brunch, especially millennials, especially ladies.
Yeah.
They
We
want
love
to
brunch.
do brunch. And so we see that as a day part that's growing, and that's why we've just implemented a new brunch program in Matchbox. We call it Brunch Box. It's an unlimited format where a customer can go in and get unlimited out of about 32 items on the menu. Pick as much as you want, eat as much as you want. It's not the old-time buffets.
Right.
It's coming out of the kitchen, so it's still fresh. It's still being made to order, but it's unlimited. So Matchbox has that program. We're putting something very similar in American Tap Room and Hen Quarter as well.
Okay, when can we expect that? Because we got a Matchbox. You guys are putting a Matchbox in downtown Silver Spring.
Correct.
Where our station is
It'll
located.
open up with the new program.
Oh, okay. So we can go get the brunch.
Yep.
Is it? Do you allocate it solely to Sundays, like a lot of
No,
people
it's
do
Saturday
the brunch?
and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday.
Nice.
And, yep. In fact, we're going to open that restaurant by the 4th week of March.
Nice.
So,
Okay,
so we're about 3 weeks away.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And before I let you go to Warren, how did you decide or pick these brands? Like, how does one go about saying, okay, I want to purchase this Austin Grill? Like, what is it about the brands, and how do you go about
Great
that?
question. Austin Grill, as an example, we bought it because it was a 25-year brand, Washington brand, that had a great product. But I bought it with the understanding we could scale it down and put it onto college campuses and corporate accounts. When I looked at the Tex-Mex segment, Chipotle did not franchise at the time. Moe's and some of the others, in my opinion, were not worth paying the royalties. So we bought Austin Grill and we've scaled it down, and now we have about 60 of them on college campuses and corporate accounts. So we look for brands that we can put into a smaller footprint and then license that brand to our other operating divisions. So we're basically operating today four divisions.
Okay.
We have our retail division, our joint venture division, our solo, which basically colleges and universities, historical Black colleges and universities, food service. And then we do the same thing with facilities management. So we provide facilities management also on college campuses. But our retail group now will franchise the brand to our contract side of the business. So we now are franchising to ourselves as opposed to going out and paying a lot of royalties to others.
Oh, okay.
We still do. I mean, we operate today some Chick-fil-A's as an example. We operate Chick-fil-A's on college campuses. We opened the first one in a train station at Union Station.
Awesome.
It's the first Chick-fil-A in a train station. So we operate Chick-fil-A and KFC and Subway and some of the other brands on college campuses. But as much as possible, we try to put our own brands on. So Matchbox now we will create a smaller footprint. The first one will probably go into Union Station. We'll attempt to put some in the airports locally. We'll scale it down to a 1,500 square foot space. And then ultimately we'll put them on college campuses and in corporate accounts as well.
Nice. Okay, so we got a lot to look forward to, man.
Okay.
Hey, this is awesome. I've learned a lot. Question two: when you say operate, is that the same as owning too?
Correct.
So when you say you're operating the Chick-fil-A and the KFC, because I always try to make sure we know kind of and understand the terminology.
Right.
So when you say operate, that means
We're
ownership?
a franchisee.
Or franchisee,
of
right.
Chick-fil-A.
Got
So we pay royalty to Chick-fil-A. We get the brand, the license, and then we operate. So the people operating are Thompson employees working in that brand.
Got it. Okay. And before I let you go, one of the things, my producer of this podcast, Culturetects Zeppelin, he's an avid reader.
Okay.
And so him and I have we have a 2-person book club where we basically, he sends me a book and I read it and I send him books to read. So every time we get to meet incredible people like yourself, we always ask about 3 books or at least 3 books that you could tell us. One for business, one within your industry, and one that really inspired you or changed your life. So,
One in
do
the
you even
industry.
have a lot of time to read? I feel like you do a lot of work.
Right. One that I thought about. One is written by J.W. Marriott. It's called Without Reservation. Okay. And that's in our industry. It talks about people. It talks about the service industry, the hospitality industry, attention to detail. A lot of the things that I learned through the 9 years of working there at Marriott. So that's one that's really industry specific. Another one of my favorites was written by Reginald Lewis. It was called "Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun?"
Oh, I heard about that.
Reginald Lewis was. I actually took my business plan to him when I was starting. Sat in his lobby all day. Never met with him. Left the plan. He called me a few days later, and I was trying to raise $2 million. He said, "I'll give you the $2 million for 85% of the company."
Jeez.
And I said, "Well, I really don't want to come work for you." So I didn't do the deal with him, but he's been a mentor. Even though I've never met him face to face, he's been a mentor. He was a mentor until the time he passed away. I admired him. But his book is a very, very interesting book, and it talks about, how African Americans can do deals, do leverage buyouts, figuring out how to make the financial structures work in various deals. So I would encourage that one. And then Good to Great by Jim Collins. it's a book that we've all read here in the company, and it talks about not settling for good when the opportunity to have greatness is there. Never being complacent, never being satisfied, continuing to challenge the company and continuing to challenge ourselves as individuals.
Nice, nice. I mean, all three of those sound good. We're reading them. We'll definitely be reading them. We'll let you know about it. Because I did wonder, when you said originally getting the deal with Marriott, you had to raise $2 million of your own money. You put up 100,000 of your own capital, which I'm sure
Right,
is a lot of money
right.
to put up. But how did you come up with the other 2 million? Did you have to get? I assume you had to get pretty creative, unless you just knew
Well,
people that had money. Or
it was interesting. The fella who did the analysis of the deal at Reginald Lewis's shop, his name ended up being Daryl Thompson. So Daryl called me up and said, "Look, I've looked at your business plan. I can help you raise the money, and you don't have to give up 85%."
oh wow,
So he ended up coming down. We met, hit it off. We were about the same age at the time, and he introduced me to another group of venture capital guys who took me on a road show, and we raised the money in about 2 weeks, and that's how we got the financing going.
So getting creative, that means we really need to read that book, because a lot of times
Yeah.
for our people, a lot of times financing is the biggest issue.
Right.
And like you said, a lot of times the banks won't finance
Right.
you, especially if you don't have necessarily the history
Sure.
or a certain amount of down payment. So
Right.
I guess being creative is
Right.
key, and networking and
Right.
meeting people.
Absolutely.
So that's good that you took that chance and
Yeah.
went up there to sit in his office, even though
Right.
you didn't meet with them.
It was right after the movie Wall Street came out. This was back
Okay.
in 1985, I think it was.
Yeah.
The movie came out, so it was my favorite movie at the time. So I said, if Bud Fox can do it, then I can as well.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And look what came out of that. That's awesome. Well, Warren, again, thank you so much. Before I let you go, too, if for some reason, okay, if I wanted to invest in a restaurant, this is my own personal question. I think again, one of the big takeaways I get from you and Thompson Hospitality is, one, diversify. So your company is very diversified. You're not relying on any one brand, any one restaurant, any one field. You're doing everything from staffing to managing and operating. So you're well diversified.
Right.
So I get that from you. If I wanted to invest in a restaurant, though, someone brings a great idea to me, what do you suggest that I, as an investor, what should I be looking out for? How should I go about getting into the restaurant business? Because when I sat and talked with different banking people, venture capitalist people, everyone says, don't do a restaurant. Don't put your money into a restaurant. They don't make money and things like that. And yet here I'm sitting with a guru of it. So I'm just curious,
I mean,
what advice would
if
you
you're
give?
going to invest with someone else in a restaurant, you've got to make sure, number one, that person knows what he or she is doing. That they've got the experience, they've made the mistakes, they've had the successes. Number two, I would always ask, how much skin in the game are they willing to put in? If they're not putting any of their own money in and a substantial amount of their own assets in, then you don't want to do it either. So I would always, I get people who come in all the time and they want me to invest in something. And they'll say, well, I'm not really going to quit my job. I'm going to continue to do this part-time, or I'm not really putting any money in myself. I don't have any capital. Well, everybody's got some money. It's a matter of what percentage of your money are you willing to put in. And if the answer is zero, then I'm not putting my money in either. So,
Put some of your own.
right.
Got you. So make sure they got some experience, some skin in the game,
Yep.
and probably a good concept too.
Exactly.
Make sure they have a cool
Exactly.
concept. All right. Otherwise, I need to just go buy me a warehouse and wait for all these restaurants to
There
do
you
this,
Right.
this new technical IT.
Right.
Grubhub meets the restaurant field, and
Right.
just I'll buy the warehouse. Y'all just put it in there. Have at it. But Warren, thank you again so much for your time. Anything else you want to say to anybody listening, young entrepreneurs, or anybody listening who wants to get into the hospitality game?
No, I think your comment earlier, it is a great industry. It is an industry that's wide open. It's an industry that's continuing to grow and evolve. And I think, especially African Americans, a lot of us look at the hospitality industry as beneath us, or something that we didn't go to school to learn how to do, how to be a server, or how to be a cook, or how to run a restaurant. But I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and I would encourage young people, especially minorities, to continue to look at the opportunities that the hospitality industry has to offer. I think that when my oldest nephew, who's 20 years old now, and he's in school in Richmond, but he's called me the other day. He wants to go into one of our accounts down there and start learning some from the ground up. We're going to start him out washing dishes and doing the things that he needs to do to learn the business. And if he's willing to, as a college student, to go in to a college account and wash dishes and mop floors, that tells me he's got his head on right, that he's willing to start at the bottom to learn the business. And I would encourage any other young person who really is serious about getting into it to be willing to start at the bottom, at least to understand the business. You don't have to stay there, but you need to go there. Right.
That's great advice. Right. You don't have to stay there, but you do need to go there. I'm with you, Warren. Thanks again, man.
Okay.
Thompson Hospitality. We'll see them at their $1 billion party. Just let me know when the party is, when you guys hit the $1 billion.
All right. Absolutely.
There it is. Culturetects. Boom.